I left town for 48 hours to walk my daughter down the aisle. 2 days, that's all. And when I came back, 3 living pieces of my childhood had been erased like chalk off a board. I'm not being poetic. I turned onto my street still wearing the same suit from the wedding, because I was too tired to change before making the 6-hour drive home, and I knew something was wrong before I even hit my driveway. The skyline behind my house looked shaved. Too open. Too bright. Like somebody had taken a razor to a memory. Then I stepped out of the car, and the smell hit me. Fresh-cut wood. Raw sap. That sweet, almost vanilla scent you get splitting firewood in January. Except it was June, humid, cicadas buzzing, and I wasn't planning on building a bonfire. I walked around back, and my legs just stopped working for a second. My backyard looked like a logging site. 3 white oaks, massive, cathedral tall, older than anyone living on this street, were gone. Not trimmed. Not damaged. Gone. Reduced to wide, flat stumps and a carpet of pale sawdust glowing under the afternoon sun. The trunks had been hauled off. The canopy that used to cool the entire backside of my house every summer afternoon. Gone. The tire swing. Gone. The dappled light where my kids used to chase lightning bugs. Just sky. And the only thing louder than the silence was the sound of my neighbor's new waterfall feature spilling into her infinity pool. Her name was Claire Hallbrook. Claire moved in about 3 years ago and bought the old Whitman place. 1920s brick colonial, ivy crawling up the sides, creaky but dignified. Tore it down within 6 months. Replaced it with what she called a contemporary statement. Floor-to-ceiling glass. Steel beams. Imported limestone. A rooftop deck with LED strip lighting that glowed at night like a spaceship had parked in a historic district outside Asheville and decided to stay. Most of us here have been around for decades. My parents bought my house in the 70s. I grew up climbing those oaks. Carved my initials into one when I was 12. Proposed to my wife, Marissa, under the biggest one, knees shaking worse than they did at my daughter's wedding. We hung a tire swing from the lowest branch when our son turned 6. Claire didn't see any of that. She saw shade blocking her sunset view of the valley. It started small, comments over the fence. You ever think about trimming those trees, Daniel? They cast a lot of shadow over my yard in the afternoons. I'd smile. They've been casting that same shadow since 1894. I think we're all used to it. She'd laugh, but not the kind of laugh that means she's joking. You know what I mean? About a year after she moved in, her backyard turned into a construction zone. Jackhammers replaced birdsong. She installed that infinity pool that spilled toward the valley, built a stone patio, brought in palm trees, in western North Carolina like we were suddenly coastal Florida. Installed heaters so she could swim in October. Somewhere in the middle of that, she got more direct. I had an arborist look at your oaks, she told me one afternoon while I was raking leaves. He says they're stressed, possibly diseased. Honestly, they could be dangerous. Your arborist looked at my trees from your side of the fence, I said. They've been inspected by the city twice in 10 years. They're fine. She tilted her head like I was naive. If one falls on my property, that's a liability issue. It wasn't about liability. From her second-story deck, my trees interrupted her panoramic sunset. We both knew it. We just pretended we didn't. A few months before my daughter's wedding, she made an offer. What if I cover professional management? Just lifting the canopy, removing lower limbs. It would open things up for both of us. Professional management. Nice phrase for butchering. No, I said, polite but firm. They're protected under the historic overlay. Urban forest designation. I'm not touching them unless the city tells me to. Her smile went thin. You're being sentimental. You're being impatient. We didn't speak much after that. So when I stood there staring at 3 stumps where my oaks had stood, I didn't have to guess. I walked straight to the fence line. Claire was floating in her pool, oversized sunglasses, glass of something clear sweating beside her. You cut down my trees. She didn't even sit up all the way. Daniel, you're back. How was the wedding? You cut down my trees. She sighed like I was being dramatic. They were structurally compromised. I had a certified service assess them. Emergency mitigation allows action when there's imminent danger. We filed Friday morning. I was in Charleston Friday morning. That's unfortunate timing. I gripped the fence so hard my knuckles went white. You were on my property. If a diseased oak had fallen on a guest during a pool party, you'd be singing a different tune. They weren't diseased. Her eyes flicked toward the valley, now completely unobstructed. They were in the way. Monday morning I called the city forestry department. Emergency removal permits had been filed. It would take weeks to review. If deemed hazardous, it might be justified. Weeks. Meanwhile, my backyard looked like grief. Marissa tried to calm me down that night at the kitchen table. They're just trees. They're not just trees, I said. They're habitat. That word stuck. My Aunt Eleanor had been a botanist at UNC back in the 70s. She helped push for our hillside to be designated part of a protected urban forest corridor because of native migratory species that nested in mature oak canopies. I remembered her bringing grad students with clipboards, whispering about nesting patterns. I hadn't thought about those files in decades. That night I went down into the basement and started digging through boxes labeled in her careful handwriting. Brittle maps, yellowed field notes, correspondence, and then I found a thick folder. Ridgerist Urban Forest Corridor, Federal Cooperative Agreement, 1978. I sat on the basement floor reading for over an hour, dehumidifier humming behind me. One section made my hands shake. Mature white oak clusters designated as critical canopy habitat for federally monitored migratory species. Removal requires federal review and ecological impact assessment. Federal review. There were maps marked in red ink. 3 red circles almost exactly where my trees had stood. Let me back up a sec. I'm not the kind of guy who jumps straight to calling Washington. I teach high school history. I believe in neighborly solutions. But standing there holding proof my aunt had fought to protect this hillside decades ago, something shifted. This wasn't about revenge. It was about someone deciding rules didn't apply to her. The next morning I scanned every document and started making calls. State Conservation Office first. The woman on the line went quiet when I gave her the agreement number. That corridor is still active, she said slowly. Any canopy removal within designated zones should trigger automatic federal review. It didn't. Pause. Give me your address. By noon I'd filed formal complaints with the Regional Fish and Wildlife Office and the EPA Compliance Division. I sent before and after photos, birthday parties, graduation barbecues, the tire swing, proof those trees were mature and healthy. I didn't tell Claire. 3 days later, 2 government vehicles pulled up in front of her house. I was grading papers when I saw them, dark green SUV, white pickup with agency seal. Officials in field vests stepped out with clipboards. Marissa looked at me over her coffee mug. Is that? I nodded. They spoke to Claire on her patio. I saw one point toward the slope. Toward the stumps. Within an hour they were in my yard measuring diameters, taking soil samples. One biologist knelt by the largest stump and ran her hand over the rings. Do you know how old this was? About 125. Low whistle. This was prime canopy. Prime canopy. Over the next weeks things escalated quietly. Claire hired attorneys. Suits with tablets paced her property line. One afternoon she caught me at the mailbox. What exactly did you file, Daniel? The truth. My legal team says that designation is outdated. Page 14. It auto-renews unless formally dissolved. She stared like she was recalibrating who she thought I was. You're enjoying this? No, I said honestly. I'd prefer my trees. That landed. Preliminary findings came back. Unauthorized habitat destruction pending full review. Then investigators widened the scope. Once federal agencies start looking, they look at everything. Her pool excavation had cut into protected root systems. Imported landscaping included invasive species. Hardscape coverage exceeded permeable surface limits. It wasn't one violation. It was a pattern. A month later she knocked on my door, no sunglasses this time. We need to talk. You escalated this beyond reason, she said. Do you know what federal restoration orders look like? You escalated it when you stepped onto my property with chainsaws. If they issue full restoration, I could be forced to remove the pool. I looked past her at the infinity edge spilling toward the valley. I understand you cut down healthy trees for a better sunset. You could withdraw your complaint. It's not mine anymore. She studied me, then said something unexpected. I grew up with nothing. I worked my entire life to afford this house. I just wanted something beautiful. There it was. Not just arrogance or rival. Proof she belonged. But belonging isn't the same as owning. Beauty that erases what came before it isn't really beauty, I said quietly. 2 weeks later the official order came down. Thick envelope. Heavy language. Unauthorized destruction of protected canopy habitat within active federal corridor. Mandated full restoration to pre-development ecological baseline. In plain English, the pool had to go. So did most of the backyard she'd built. She was fined $200,000 and placed under long-term conservation monitoring. The demolition started at sunrise a month later. Concrete saws screamed. Jackhammers cracked stone. The infinity edge was cut open and drained, water rushing out in a muddy torrent. I stood at my fence line. Not gloating. Not smiling. Just watching. Claire came outside once, arms folded tight. Our eyes met. No fire in hers now. Just something tired. Weeks passed. Patio ripped up. Palms hauled away. Heaters gone. In their place came soil specialists and native ecologists. White oak saplings. Red maples. Dogwoods. Erosion blankets. One afternoon the biologist knocked on my door. We secured grant funds for replanting on your side as well. Heritage-grade replacements. It won't bring back what you lost, but it will re-establish the corridor. I nodded. Thank you. Young trees now stand staked in my yard, mesh guards against deer. It'll take decades for them to reach the height of the old oaks, maybe longer than I've got. And here's the part nobody tells you about winning. It's quiet. No fireworks. Just absence. Even with the pool gone, even with legal vindication, I still miss my trees. Justice doesn't rewind time. 6 months later, a for sale sign appeared in Claire's yard. The listing mentioned modern design and breathtaking views, didn't mention federal monitoring. Buyers noticed the orange conservation markers. The price dropped, then dropped again. One evening she knocked one last time. I sold it. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I never hated your trees, she said finally. I hated what they represented. What was that? Roots. People who belonged before I got here. That landed deeper than anything else. You could have belonged, I said, without cutting anything down. She nodded, distant. She moved to a high-rise downtown. Glass and steel. No trees tall enough to block anything. The new buyers, younger couple from Charlotte, came over with a bottle of wine their first week. We love the restoration project, the wife said. It feels grounded. Grounded. It's been almost 3 years. The saplings are taller. Birds are nesting again. The shade isn't what it was, but it's coming back. Sometimes I run my hand over the old stumps left low to the ground. You can count droughts and good years in those rings. Silent history written in wood. People ask if it was worth it. The stress. The tension. I usually say yes. But here's where it gets complicated. Property rights matter. Progress matters. Not every old thing should stay untouched forever. At the same time, not everything is disposable because it's inconvenient. Claire wasn't a cartoon villain. She was ambitious, proud, self-made. I understand that instinct more than I'd like to admit. But beauty that requires erasing someone else's foundation, or a century of living roots, carries a cost. In her case, it was financial and public. In mine, it was emotional. So I'm curious, if you were in my position, would you have filed those complaints or let it go to keep the peace? And if you were in hers, finally able to afford the dream, would you have seen those trees as history or obstacles? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you'd expect. Because at the end of the day, this wasn't just about oaks or pools or permits. It was about who gets to shape a place, and who has to live with what's left behind. If this made you think differently about your own neighborhood, about justice, about boundaries, share your perspective. Like, subscribe, send it to someone who's ever had a property line dispute go a little too far. I'll see you next time.